From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Deck, and most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know 2023. A little bit of fanfare, Paul, if you will. Yeah, perfect. There we go. We made it. We're coming to you from the past year. Listeners, fellow conspiracy realists, you may have noticed that we took some time off, got a little R&R, hopefully, by the time you're hearing this, and we hope you had a great end of the year as well. We figured what better way to kick things off by doing one of our favorite segments on the show, Strange News. We're going to talk about a fire. We're going to talk about a great debate regarding the nature of art and ownership. And we're also going to talk about something that I think we've always dreamed of, nuclear fusion, caveat, asterisk, asterisk.
Yeah, and while this isn't exactly like a year-end roundup of news, several of these stories really do kind of encapsulate the zeitgeist of the year in some ways. Specifically, this fusion thing, which has been a long time coming for many years, and the idea of AI and where it's heading and facial recognition turning into a bit of a novelty item that is giving people, fun avatars for their profile without them maybe realizing that they're kind of feeding an unseen beast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think all three of our stories today further these larger conversations. So what better way to kick off the new year? I propose that we I propose, since we've got two science ones, we start maybe with what you just set up so beautifully, Noel. Let's talk about Lensa, and let's see. Now, everybody's familiar with this. If you are on social media, you have seen some really beautiful profile pics in very specific styles that people have used through the Lensa app. But that's not the only one of its kind out there. But I think that's where the debate really took root. Is that correct?
It is, and it's the kind of viral marketing you really can't pay for. Better yet, let's have users pay for the privilege of advertising our app. There's no watermark on these images, which I thought was really interesting. So it created this conversation. Where'd you get that? Where'd that come from? Wow, you look like an elven princess or a superhero or a freaking Blade Runner character, all these stylized portraits.
I saw some kind of you.
I did it because I'm a sucker, and I love a good technology gimmick, a big fan. I don't want to be left behind in the conversation. So I am the first to admit that I unknowingly fed said beast. But again, let's get back to kind of the conversation. All of a sudden, the internet was flooded, much like all of those, kind of AI generated little meme things, like what are the, you feed it some text. What was it? Not Midjourney, but the original one. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting. But it was the one that kind of was easily accessible without pay. The internet and some text, and you could have like Johnny Cash eating corn on the cob or whatever it might be. So that was, a massive internet phenomenon. This is sort of the next version of that. But what these are, they're not that same kind of weird, like a deep dream kind of psychedelic mishmash kind of stuff. These are highly, highly stylized, at times photorealistic portraits of you. And all you got to do is, first ask the question like I did. In fact, it was asked of super producer extraordinaire Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson, when I saw these incredible, beautiful portraits. It looked like a human being had done them, and been paid handsomely, to do that. To which she replied, it's this app called Lensa. Lensa, an app created by Prisma AI. You feed it a handful of selfies. I think it's 20. or something like it's either 10 or 20. I think it's 10. And they have to be of a certain distance, like a certain frame, right? Like you don't want a full body thing. I think they'll reject them and it won't tell you why. And you'll just have to find one that's more appropriate. And once it does that, depending on the load, in terms of the demand, it'll take between 15, 20. I did it for a couple of friends and a little later, after kind of the thing started really hitting, it was taking a couple hours to process those selfies, and you pay a couple bucks. I think it's like $5 or something like that for, I think 50. And you can pay, I think, $20 for 100. And they're done kind of in these buckets, these sort of style buckets. Like one of them is like superhero. One of them is like Greek mythology or something like that. They had me looking like Odin or, frickin' Thor or whatever, with the beard. And they gave me like Valkyrie horns and all this stuff. And
it
then
was
some
genuinely
of them were
awesome.
And they're super cool. That's the thing. Y'all, this is cool, okay? I am fascinated by where AI is going.
I did it too, but I didn't upload it because I was talking with some of my friends in the art community, and they were very much of the opinion that something was rotten in the state of Denmark. You know what I mean?
That's the thing with AI, even this like Mid-Journey stuff. Our dear friend and illustrator of the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know book, Nick Benson, he has a subscription to Mid-Journey and is simultaneously fascinated and terrified by this technology because Mid-Journey specifically, you've got some amazing folks that are using this to kind of create images of things that just don't exist. If you have the finesse and you can enter the right kind of text, which can get really elaborate, like you're describing the lighting, you're describing the background, you're describing like a style of cinema, like for example, or like maybe a director or an artist or whatever. And if you do it really well, you can create some genuinely remarkable things that aren't meant to mimic necessarily what a human would do. It's sort of taking it to the next level. And you could, let's say you're a really interesting artist, you could combine these AI things with your own work or even feed it your own art, and it'll like spit out some genuinely fascinating things. A buddy of mine, a great artist and musician here in Atlanta named Danny Carey Bailey. If you follow him on Instagram, just look for Danny Carey Bailey. He'll make iterations of these things and then animate them together to create these kind of moving, like video loops of this super uncanny, not uncanny valley, just uncanny, like, fantasy landscapes and things that just, like I said, just don't exist. These objects that look like something out of a, David Cronenberg kind of body horror kind of stuff. Like really, really neat if you kind of know what you're doing. But that's not what Lensa is doing. What Lensa is doing is essentially mimicking these highly stylized portraits that, folks at say cons, Comic-Con, Dragon Con, whatever, they set up their booths. And this is the kind of stuff they sell. This kind of like D&D portraiture, or like fan art, whatever it might be. But these are done maybe using some technology like a Wacom tablet or whatever the newer iterations of that is. But they're using their skills as an artist. They're using a stylus of some kind, or they're drawing and then scanning them into a computer and then using that to layer and add additional stuff, or it's entirely analog and it's, paint and pen and ink or what have you. What this Prisma AI by way of the Lensa app thing is doing is creating what they're referring to as magic avatars, which is like biting this whole game, this whole style that typically you would have a very skilled artist either do a portrait or like, let's say a character from Game of Thrones or whatever. And you'd pay good money for these, or they can sell prints of them. A lot of times original pieces are very expensive. There's only one. But if you sell really high quality, like Geekly art prints or whatever, you can sell dozens of them and really make a good living that way. Again, back to Nick, he did this as well. And he had friends that did it, but it freaks him out while also completely fascinating him. And the reason this is extra sketchy is because it could potentially completely remove that kind of business from these individuals who rely on this stuff to keep them going. Not to mention, what this could mean for, like, say, corporate art. You know, again, a lot of these individuals get these corporate gigs where they're like doing illustrations or logos or whatever. And the more this AI stuff progresses, it's going to become increasingly indistinguishable from, quote unquote, the real thing, as in done by a human. And we know how much corporations love jumping on trends like this and love doing anything they can to remove the human element, because it's something they can't control. And this will allow them to keep costs under control. And at the end of the day, are they really that concerned with how authentic or bespoke this art is, as long as it kind of gets the job done? Probably not.
Yeah, it depends on the corporation, right? If they're an architectural firm or if they're a corporation that is involved with the art world, then they probably do want to have something bespoke. But that's to your point, it's probably more an exception to rule. You know, this is always a time when people make predictions. And one thing that's strange about recording in 2023 through the magic of podcast editing is we made a prediction on this show that is coming to pass. I would say this Lensa conversation, the reason I think it lends itself to a larger conversation, whatever, no pun left behind, is because it's part of this bigger sea change. You could go to stuff like sassbook.com. Right. The prediction we made was that eventually AI will have the ability to make a bespoke film for you. Put in your favorite stars or your name or anyone with enough audio footage, visual footage, and boom, it'll make a movie. I just tried Sassbook and put in Stuff They Don't Want You to Know podcast episode, and they gave us the sentence, "The first day of my trial, the judge, a man named Mr. D, asked me a series of questions about the events surrounding my birth. He was the first of many, I guess, who had been in the room." Weird, but coherent.
And coherent and weirdly on brand in terms of the voice of the way we might set up a topic. You know what I mean? And we also, I think we've made no secrets about the fact that even our company has participated in, you know, we will pilot or, you know, invest in kind of technology or technological companies. And we've talked about how we participated in a pilot program to kind of create AI versions of our voices. And the goal there is to make it where we don't have to do a million iterations of ad reads, right? This app or whatever it is can, you know, create those for us or geo-target them by feeding. We had to feed it we had to do a bunch of reads and feed it this voice data.
It can also translate into a bunch of languages and make us sound like we speak those languages.
But imperfectly. Right?
Imperfectly.
So, like, if you know Spanish, the idioms are off.
Well, of course they're going to be off because we're making references and speaking in parlance that is very specifically American, you know, slang and all that stuff. And without a really robust AI that can kind of flip those things and Tetris them into a different format, it's going to be weird. You know, it might get the job done and sound to the untrained ear like, okay, that's legit. But if you're really a native Spanish speaker, it's going to be super awkward. And it required us to kind of go back to or our, you know, bosses and whomever is kind of, you know, behind the scenes of this stuff to go back to the drawing board and figure out ways to make that stuff more believable. So what exactly is Lensa doing, and how long has it been around? Surprisingly, it's been around since 2018, they say. The company says there's a really good Mashable article by Mira Navlaka from earlier this month about this. And one thing that you could also do that's interesting in this is you can change your gender. You can put in, you know, female, male, or other, which I'm not sure kind of what that encompasses. I didn't do that, but I have seen, you know, friends who are in the trans community, you know, doing it for their gender of choice and making these like anime elaborate, like, God, I wish I was that. I looked like that, you know, and that's the case for, you know, any gender. It's all very hyper stylized and hyper kind of like hot. You know what I mean?
No, you said you had to upload like 10 or more images.
10. Yeah.
What does the company do with those images and the like face data that they create?
I'm glad you asked that.
It owns them.
Yeah. And the thing is, though, I mean, you could make the argument that it doesn't need you to give it to them directly. We know about these scrapers and things, you know, how much information we just willingly just shove out onto the internet. If you Google any of our names, you're going to find probably about 10 pictures easily, you know, that could be used to feed this machine. Maybe because we're public, you know, whatever, figures, for lack of a better way of describing it. Maybe there's more than an average person, but honestly, even an average person, Facebook isn't like private exactly, unless you go through a lot of steps to completely make it private. And even then, I am pretty skeptical as to, these things not being available to the right kind of scraper, which is just an app that goes and just gathers all this available data, images, little whatever tidbits off the internet, right?
Yeah, I'd like to also shout out the Australian artist Kim Lutweiler, I believe. She's been making rounds in The Guardian because she had, and several science outfits, she had seen the styles of artists in her community and her own style being used heavily in Lensa portraits. And the question is, are those artists being compensated? The answer is no. And it's so insidious, man. It goes back to like MySpace quizzes and Facebook quizzes. People are obsessively fascinated with themselves, right? Tell me more about me. Show me more about myself. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it tricks people into giving away things that they might not have given away if they had, less obtuse terms of service or clear explanations. And as you pointed out, we're already a bridge too far. It's the equivalent of having face tattoos. We have irreparably entered the public sphere for better or worse. So learn from us, right?
Yeah, and
it's
to
too late for us.
To the previous point about the corporate side of this thing, we know AI is being used to generate kind of stock images.
Sure.
That's a really great use of this. Instead of having to set up a photo shoot, you can just use this data that people are feeding you to create guy with golf club, and cup of coffee or whatever it might be that you need, and then it's going to be a lot cheaper than having to license like a Getty image or even like Shutterstock or any of these kind of like subscription-based services where you can use these images, and there are terms of services that you have to stick to in terms of how you can use it in commercial work or what blah 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 whatever. So Lensa claims they don't retain this face data. But, we've heard that before. And there is an email, privacy@lensa-ai.com, where you can request that they delete all your personal data. But it is kind of that like opt-out thing again, as opposed to giving permission. But it's that shiny new object that makes everyone so excited they don't bother reading the terms of use because they want their pretty picture. They want their magic avatar or whatever. And let's just make no mistake, at the very least, even if they're not retaining our actual data, we are training their AI. We are training this algorithm that they have to be the best at this, because the more data you feed these things, that's how it works. That's why it was such a big deal, like in one of the Batman movies where they turned every cell phone in the world into a microphone or something like that.
Dark Knight.
Yeah, and that's what we also get and worry about with things like Alexa, that it's when it's listening and what happens to that data, whether it retains that or not in some sort of permanent way. You are training it to be better. To be a better AI. And back to Nick again. Nick does a lot of art for the hip hop group Run the Jewels. And when he first got Midjourney, he typed in like Killer Mike animated portrait or Killer Mike kind of style, whatever. I don't know the exact text, but what it spit out looked a hell of a lot like one of Nick's pieces, which exist on the internet. In marketing materials for Run the Jewels. So it is using the work of artists that already is out there to feed this algorithm. And it is using our faces, to create a better algorithm to make kind of fake faces.
And you said you have to pay for this app or it's free?
That's the beauty of it. I mean, the beauty in terms of on their end. Yeah. Because it looks so good, they figured, well, hell, we can convince people to pay a couple bucks for this. I sure did. I paid for it 3 times, one for myself, one for my kid, and one for my kid's mom.
So they are associating your face with an account with a credit card, likely that you use to pay for the thing.
Like I said, I'm a big giant sucker, which is why I think I'm the perfect person to bring this story, to you. Because I and again, I've mentioned this in the past, like, do I really care that much I think I'm maybe starting to a little more now that I understand kind of more the big picture of this and how my face or my kid's face or some facsimile of it could end up in an advertisement without my permission or without any legal recourse. And that's the future we're heading towards. But also, like, just by virtue of being on the internet, I think these algorithms are getting fed whether we, do it willingly or not. So it's sort of like a, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. So why not just get the pretty picture? But maybe I'm being naive there. But I do understand the future we're heading for. I just am like, do I really have a choice? So why not just enjoy the ride, I guess? So lots more to come with this kind of tech and the Lensa app and whatever the next gen version of it might be. And starting to see the way advertising starts to kind of evolve because of these algorithms. Because they don't want to freak us out and do it too quickly, but it's inevitable. So let's take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, possibly with robot voices, because that's definitely a thing that's being used in ad reads nowadays too, by the way. And you can usually sort of tell, but it's going to come a point where you can't. And then we'll be back.
All right, we're back, and we're going to talk about fire really quickly. I'm doing this super fast, guys. Speaking of fire, I want to call out my friend Robert Jabri Brown, slash Saint X Bree slash Bree Fontaine slash. There's so many ways you might know him on the old internet. Just want to shout him out really quickly. He had a video come out for a new song not long ago. I just want everyone who's out there to search YouTube for Robert Jabri, ROBERT JABRE. Search for I'm, capital I apostrophe M. Check out that video. It's just one of the coolest songs I've heard him do in a long time. He's an incredible artist who creates music.
Left Hand is good too. That's one of my favorites of his.
100%.
Yeah, I love it.
He's got a ton of great music out there. Search Robert Jabri.
He also did a couple of videos that you had something to do with, Matt. There's one called Smurf that he did with beats or with participation from one of my favorite kind of electronic, weird, jazzy sample head guys named Amon Tobin for Ninja Tune. And it's a really badass kung fu themed video that you and your homies had a big hand in.
Yes, Chandler Mays, Tyler Klang, Casey Pegram, and Bright Elephant. Anyway, just shouting out you, Robert Jabri. Everybody go check him out. Okay, here we go. Now, speaking of other fires, massive fires, there was one in the neighborhood of Red Hook in Brooklyn, New York. I wasn't really sure where this was, guys, so I had to go to Google Maps. I posted a link in there if you want to check it out. This is a huge warehouse on Columbia Street. And one of the things that this warehouse houses, because this isn't the only thing in that warehouse, but one of the things that it houses is the Erie Basin Auto Pound. Guys, when is the last time you remember hearing the phrase going to the pound or taking, you're going to take a car to the pound or you got to go to the pound?
Right, impounding a car, right? This is just for perspective, on the road a while back before we recorded and on a video call with you, Matt, where I said, did you hear about the fire? And it's strange because we are constantly in contact about things that go on, and this sent me down a rabbit hole instantly. You know, it was a bummer to be on the rest of the call, and I'm a pretty great listener, but I was uphill for that one.
Well, nobody on that call, most of whom were in New York, by the way, and in Manhattan, had heard about this fire, had seen this fire, even though the blaze was so huge. A lot of New Yorkers who did get to see the black smoke arising from Red Hook in that area over in Brooklyn, they thought it had started on Manhattan because there was so much black smoke just pouring over the area. Well, here's why this fire is important, why we're talking about it. This facility, this pound, held a lot of evidence, including cars, like you would, get impounded for that kind of evidence, other vehicles. It also held a ton of DNA evidence, historical NYPD DNA evidence.
Going back decades, right?
Oh, yeah. Decades and decades. And it was all just in this huge warehouse, stored away. And when this fire occurred, this information is coming from December 13th, 2022, by the way. So that's when the fire occurred, and that's the best information we have right now. There haven't been a ton of updates about this. All the news was just trying to assess how much damage was done to, that store of DNA and that store of evidence that could potentially in some way affect a new case or a current case, but mostly it's just affecting older cases, especially cold cases. And that doesn't bode well for, New Yorkers or law enforcement in general.
It's terrible too, because, this is coming on the heels of the ongoing COVID pandemic, right? Or whatever new diseases will get published in 2023. So the judicial system already slowed to a crawl, right? Even so, the backlog problem has increased by an order of magnitude. But Matt, I think I'm speaking for a lot of our fellow conspiracy realists here when we say, what's the official explanation for the fire? And do you think it is legit?
Well, I may be off right now because I'm speaking to you from information from the 13th of December. At that time, it was unknown what sparked the fire. There is one section of this huge warehouse that did collapse or did fall, the top fell in, and underneath that section, there were a bunch of, they call them e-bikes. I'm assuming it's the kind of like bikes you can rent, around the city that get recharged and everything. They're unsure if that had anything to do with it.
There's so batteries, perhaps.
Yeah, there's a potential for that, right? There was so much combustible material within that large warehouse that they were unsure at the time what started it. There were 6 first responders and 2 civilians that got hurt trying to fight this thing and get away from this fire. So it was really big and very hot, obviously. So it's just unknown. Do you have newer information?
We will have newer information by the time this comes out, but we really don't know. One thing that stood out to me, Matt, again, I learned this from you. I learned it from watching you. I read I read a statement from the arson and explosion squad, some of those first responders you're talking about, and the firefighter chief, a guy named John Hodgins, said the fire is likely to burn for a few days.
Yeah, when it was occurring.
Bit of a laissez-faire attitude to take toward a structure fire in such a densely populated city.
Oh, yeah. Well, the only good thing is that it's on the waterfront. When it comes to, endangering a lot of other human beings, there are a lot of businesses that exist there, like it almost looks like a pier in a couple areas or just right on, the water there. Those were probably in danger. The NYPD chief, Joseph Madry, said, "This is a very serious and damaging fire. We don't know the magnitude until we see the invoice to see what was in there and see what we can salvage." So it's literally like, oh man, because this was all happening in the moment. We got to look back, see the inventory, and then we'll figure out how much of it is lost. Because they were saying that most of the contents within are probably damaged, at least damaged, right?
Right. Yeah. And there was also this ongoing concern about people on motorbikes, right? So a lot of dirt bikes got confiscated, ATVs. Yeah, it's just, it instantly sets, it could totally be an innocuous, accidental, and tragic fire. But also, without alleging conspiracy at this point, we have to say it. There are a couple of people who are probably going to get away with some stuff now, right?
Well, I was going to ask, Matt, I'm picturing, when I'm thinking about these samples being stored, some sort of cryogenic, warehouse of like dry ice steam kind of airlock kind of sitch. I'm assuming that's completely not accurate.
You're taught not each one of these things. The evidence was stored in these big cardboard containers. They refer to them as cardboard barrels, which I just don't really like that description, but they're cardboard containers of some sort. And when there's fire and you've got cardboard,
yeah,
not so great.
That shit becomes fuel.
Yeah.
and the batteries and any gas in the tanks of some of these bikes, of which there are hundreds and hundreds. Also, no sprinklers. Am I to be told there are no sprinklers here?
That is a little weird. It's a huge warehouse. You'd think there'd be some kind of fire prevention system, right? You'd think that'd be code.
Other kinds of evidence in here too, though, right? Like this is like essentially like a giant, evidence storage facility, like the kind in Breaking Bad that they destroyed with magnets. You know what I mean? So it'd be bagged up guns, any other kind of photographic evidence, like things like that, like all sorts, not just DNA.
It's like the lair of a dragon that collects evidence instead of gold.
Yes, Smaug.
Yeah. But just keep in mind, most of I'm thinking about what you said, Ben, somebody's going to get away with it. Most of this stuff is from 20, 30 years ago. Most of it, right? Not all of it. It's definitely a place where evidence goes to just sit and stay. It's not the active stuff that would probably be at a precinct somewhere.
Last interruption, I swear. Is there no good way to, quote unquote, back up DNA evidence? Do you literally have to have the material? You can't like have a record that it existed and that be enough? You have to have the stuff.
It could be, I guess. I don't know how that would work in a trial. Like if you just had
I'm just wondering,
piece of paper that said, here's the DNA. Here's a picture of what it looks like.
Would
Here's
DNA
a picture of the
from 30
sequence.
years ago even still be viable to test again? Would it still have all the juice that you need?
It's a good question. I mean, we know that there is the capacity to store digital data in DNA. That's something a little bit different. But I wonder, given the technological lag that a lot of authorities face in this regard,
backlog,
right? The backlog, the lag,
whatever.
They might not have, the bleeding edge testing and storage techniques. Which is not a ding on them. I'm sure that everybody working in that capacity wants the latest, safest, most accurate, reliable stuff, but sometimes the budget's just not there.
And like maybe the FBI has it, but not necessarily the NYPD, right?
Yeah. Guys, it just made me think, I wonder why this doesn't happen more. And this is a kind of a scary thought to me, but why don't evidence storages get attacked more often by somebody who's like the associates of someone who's going to prison or a part of a big trial? Like, I'm glad it doesn't happen.
Attack on Precinct 13, where they've got high level, mob, people in custody, and they literally do a siege, on this precinct in New York. Is the John Carpenter movie. And again, that bit in Breaking Bad where there's a laptop they need to erase because it's got, video on it. And that was honestly the first time I'd ever seen. And I was like, yeah, I saw the same thing. I was like, how does this not happen more often? It's kind of genius.
Well, they also, I mean, you're talking about heavy hitters, right? In that regard. So I imagine the evidence is stored accordingly. And let's be honest, sometimes stuff disappears. That is also true. Sometimes it's a conspiracy. Sometimes it's simple human error, right? Because incompetence can look like malevolence from far enough away. I just think a lot of people who would like evidence to be destroyed probably don't have the means to make it so,
And even if it were an inside job, I think there are systems in place, that monitor the comings and goings and checkings in and out of all this kind of stuff, that it would be really hard to completely eliminate any evidence of the thing being removed, short of blowing up the whole facility.
Yeah. No, you're right. Or just setting fire to a bunch of e-bikes.
E-bikes.
Right?
Yeah. Police had an historic drug bust. They found 100 tons of cocaine going to trial. It looks like the guys are going up the river for possession of 85 tons of cocaine. And, by the time it gets to the plea bargain, it's about 20 tons.
Yeah.
Still a lot.
Because the rats ate it, right? Like the marijuana in India, wasn't that?
I'm obviously not a. Yeah, there it is. I'm obviously not a cocaine expert. I'm sure anybody more familiar is like tons. Come on, buddy. I'm sure it's like less than that, right? Tons feels like cartel stuff.
I think that's too much.
From the movies, they usually measure it in kilos. That's like sort of the base level street amount that it would be a unit of, you know what I mean?
Illegal drugs have done so much for Americans' understanding of the metric system.
Isn't
you
that
know what I mean?
Yeah,
I've had friends who are drug dealers, and I've got to say, I think the statute's passed. I can say it. I've got to say, there are a lot of stereotypes. Those guys are great at math, often self-taught.
For sure. Wow. Hey, let's do one reminder and then let's go to the next segment. Whenever you've got video evidence of something, make sure you make backups and you disperse them. Cool? All right. Let's go on to cool. Let's hear a word from our sponsor and we'll be right back.
And we've returned. Gonna have to keep this one super brief because it's news that made the headlines. I think it'll be a future episode. It opens the door for a lot of places, so it's a great way to end our first strange news of 2023. Earlier, just quite recently, the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, or LLNL,
Love
said,
a clumsy acronym.
Right? Just wait. Little has an outfit called the National Ignition Facility, or NIF. So NIF, Lil Nif,
Nif?
not to be
rapper.
Be confused. Yeah, with SoundCloud or Basecamp. Lil Nif. Lil Nif just announced that they had made a huge breakthrough in harnessing controlled nuclear fusion, bringing the power of the sun into the hands of humans. How Promethean, right? Asterisk, caveat. So like with any story here, I don't know about you guys. A bunch of people were sending this my way. What do you make of this? We saw a post on here's where it gets crazy, and a couple of other places. The big question is, does this mean that humanity is on the cusp of limitless clean power? Finally getting ourselves off the smack that is fossil fuel, finally, burning fewer things, right? Which is already kind of an archaic way to get energy. It just works. The answer is no, not yet. Not yet, if the official stories are to be believed. In fact, we were talking a little bit off air that almost as soon as this news came out, a bevy of very principled, somewhat scandalized experts in nuclear science were coming out and saying, please stop it with these crazy headlines. We're not the Jetsons. We're not Star Trek yet. I don't know, but this is what it made me think of, and this is why I wanted to bring it to all of us listening along today without getting too much into the science, which we absolutely can do in an episode. Technological suppression is real. A, that's a given. Knowing that, is it possible that B, something like this was successful already? Is it possible? Is it plausible? Lil Nif?
Yeah, it's so funny, man. I have Pitchfork up in my just a tab from previous, and there's a new record that came out today from Lil Sims, which seems like Lil Nif and Lil Sims could guest on each other's records. Just putting that out there.
Awesome. Yeah.
But we're talking about the fusion. Like, is it possible, Ben? I'm so sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So here's simply put, the big breakthrough is that using 190 something lasers, they were able to create a situation such that more energy was produced than was put in.
Oh,
which is real sci-fi stuff.
But this doesn't necessarily mean like we've cracked it. Nuclear is no longer important. We're off the coal. We're off the oil starting tomorrow, right?
Yeah, you're correct. That's not going to happen. Now this is not to diminish the amazing science.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but it's like the Wright brothers got their plane off the ground for a few seconds at Kitty Hawk, and everybody's very excited. And their question was, when can we fly across the world? And that took a while.
Leave it to the public to put the cart before the horse. Every time.
Right. So I'm wondering if it is possible that this is not the first iteration of something like this. But the thing that keeps me from going too conspiratorial here is, if you look at the nuts and bolts that have been published, it's a lot. It's still really expensive to get it to work. This is not a light switch. We're just not there yet. And also, can fusion ever contribute? I mean, fusion could contribute to the grid, but could it ever really remove the path dependence that humans have created? I mean, solar technology improves by leaps and bounds, geothermal, wind, hydropower, those are all, in many ways they are location dependent, but they work.
And a lot of head start scientifically in terms of like the R&D put into these, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the other big conspiracy, first, wait, I didn't get a straight one from you guys. Is it possible that there was technological suppression?
I don't know, man. I don't think so.
Before this was announced?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is it possible?
It being such a non-deal breaker announcement, I think probably not. I think they're like, hell yeah, let's publish, because we did a thing, but it's also not like a game changer yet. So if the game changer part existed, then sure, but I think we'd have some loose-lipped scientists that would be, speaking out or protesting or who knows. I don't know, being assassinated.
I think we gotta approach this with super cautious optimism, because the Guardian pointed out an article they wrote about this that you posted, Ben, about since the 1950s we've been hearing, there's a fusion breakthrough.
Oh yeah,
right.
Jam tomorrow,
and it just kind of. Yeah, exactly. It reminds me of the prophecies thing that cults always have that we talk about, where it's you got to move the prophecies. Yeah, got to move that goalpost every time, because
that's a good point.
At least unlike a doomsday prophecy, this is science, right? It's a real science. It makes me think about that company we talked about, or we at least briefly mentioned a little while ago, the one that's trying to make a fusion piston or a gun of some sort.
Right.
That would reaction on one side, use that energy to start the reaction on the other side, and then back and forth. But that sounds like perpetual motion machine materials. Yeah.
When you talked about the millennial prophecies or doomsday predictions of cults and religious sects, it made me immediately think, are these Atomic Prophets, which is a great band name? Lil Nif and the Atomic Prophets.
Is that a thing?
I mean, it is now.
We need to believe that. We need to believe that.
Let's have someone send it in. I would love to hear that project. You guys are raising great points. Also, here's one thing that stood out. One of the people interviewed, one of the people making announcements regarding this did note that NIF is working with lasers that are, quote, 1980s technology, and acknowledged that the private sector is likely ahead of them in some regard. And whenever we think of tech suppression, we always think of like the Men in Black, right? The top men of Indiana Jones, having cell phones back in the 70s, which is story for a different day. But my last conspiracy I wanted to ask you guys before we wrap and move on, big oil. You think they're sweating this at all?
They're not stoked.
They're not stoked like a coal fire.
They're fracking pissed, man.
There it is. No, it's just, I don't know, because those corporations are able to function like state level actors in some regards. So I wonder if I'm sure they're eyes on this research, of course, but I wonder if they're big enough or inclined enough to take ownership of it, right? Like sort of how RJ Reynolds and tobacco companies kind of seamlessly shifted into smoking cessation tools, they called them, right? So is big oil going to be able to conspire? Or would they even care? I mean, if you're very worried about climate change, the bad news about this fusion stuff is it's not going to get across the finish line in time for all those terrible UN predictions. What is it like? Should we just do an oil company instead of a podcast? Should we be an oil company?
Let's do it. Be a little late to the market on that one, guys.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to stick with Lil Nif and Atomic Prophet.
Exactly.
So I don't want to say too much yet because I really do feel this would be an excellent future episode. And you know what? Mea culpa on our end if by the time this comes out, fusion is a thing and it just accelerated very quickly and you're listening to this on your fusion powered iPhone in some regard, then in that case, you were right. But I feel like it's a safe bet to say fusion has a ways to go.
Remember that bit from, I think it was Back to the Future 2, or maybe no, it's the end of Back to the Future 1. I think when it like kind of dovetails into 2, where he comes back from the future, which is where the line Back to the Future comes from. And he's got a Mr. Fusion in the DeLorean that he's feeding whatever garbage to, and that's the next level version of the flux capacitor.
Just biomass. That also reminds me of years and years ago when some research came out from Japan where they had plasma, like this plasma garbage thing, basically, that you could throw anything into, it would vaporize it, and it would create energy. And then we never heard about it again.
Did we talk about that with Marshall Brain?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, in a recent classic, or if it's not recent, it's coming very soon.
No, Ben and I talked about that with Marshall when we were interns.
Okay.
Yeah, dude. It goes way back.
Dr. Brain. You can't call him doctor because he refuses to get a degree. We talked about that. But Marshall, if you're listening, we're big
on
fans.
Principle.
We should bring Marshall and Chris Cogswell back, and we should talk about nuclear fusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We should also do it over pizza or something. I'm sorry, I haven't eaten today. Folks, we hope this finds you well. We can't wait to hear your thoughts. Lensa, the larger move of AI, and what's happening behind these evidence fires. Will there be a real cause determined? And, of course, nuclear fusion. What do you think? How long have they known, if you want to be conspiratorial? Well, don't keep us waiting to know. Reach out. Give us your thoughts. We can't wait to hear from you. Happy New Year. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. You can find us on the internet where we are Conspiracy Stuff on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Conspiracy Stuff on Instagram where things are popping off lately. I hope you guys enjoyed our holiday-themed our video. We put a lot of hard work into. I was personally tickled by it. Thanks to our friends at Station 16 for helping us out with all of these awesome new pieces of content that we're putting out. Content. What have I become? But seriously, though, we enjoy doing these. They're a lot of fun. Hopefully, we can keep that going into the new year, and then we hope that y'all are also enjoying them as well.
Oh, and don't forget our new TikTok channel. Yeah, that's right. We're helping China to get your
feeding
info.
The algorithm. Help us help you feed the algorithm. Help us help you help China. Help us go viral on TikTok because that's what it's all about.
And we're telling you completely true things as well, folks. And if you do not care to sip the social meds, if you're finding yourself having a dry January of one sort or another, and you prefer, to reach out and touch space with your voice on a phone, we got you covered there too. The number 1-833-STDWYTK. Slightly different cadence there. Switching things up. You'll hear a voice, you'll hear a beep like so. Beep, you got 3 minutes. Those are yours. Go ham, go nuts, and let us know if we can use your name and or message on air. Most importantly, don't censor yourself. That's not what this show is about. We literally just bleep curse words because we think it's funnier that way. If you have a story you need to tell, you've got some links, you've got some pictures, take us to the edge of the rabbit hole. Send us an email. All you have to do is drop us a line where we are.
Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.